Hi, so I want to talk about the fun topic of being the black sheep. I want to start off by saying I hesitate to use the term black sheep because I've noticed a lot of people tend to romanticize this term, and sometimes people use it as a way to signal to others that they are more intelligent, more logical, just more special overall than everybody else. But I am genuine when I say this. That isn't what I mean when I say black sheep. I don't think I'm smarter than everybody else. I'm not always right. I make mistakes. I'm a flawed person. I'm not trying to put myself above others when I say the term black sheep. With all of that being said, I know a lot of you know the feeling of being the odd one out, or feeling like the black sheep of your family or community, and I know many of you feel this way because you have left religion and are no longer part of the collective. This can be very isolating for many reasons and for obvious reasons. One of which is that religion many times puts a heavy emphasis on the in-group versus the out-group. You are either with us or against us. You are either of this world or you're on the side of God. You are either on the side of evil, or you fell into Satan's temptations, or Satan tricked you, or you are on the side of truth, aka the right side. That could be very polarizing when there is no middle ground. Their beliefs are just different than my own, and that's okay. Instead, it is you are wrong because there is only one right way to believe. That right way is you need to accept Jesus into your life / be convinced he's real, or else you will suffer the consequences of not being part of this in-group. If you know evangelicalism, you know there are serious consequences if you believe something different or you have a lack of belief in this belief system, in Jesus, in the Christian God. The consequence is suffering in hell for all of eternity. No biggie. Just, eternal torture. So within Christianity, they refer to people as sheep. You need to be one of Jesus's sheep, be part of the flock. But if you are a black sheep, well, good luck with that one, atheist. Pause really quick. I find it so interesting that many conservative Christians call people sheep as an insult, but I'm like, isn't that your whole thing, is being God's sheep? But I digress. When you are raised in this environment of different beliefs equal danger, it can be really hard to feel like you can change or be different or maybe even be yourself. This teaches you that it isn't safe to explore ideas or ways of thinking that may lead you to a different conclusion, and the right conclusion being Christianity is the truth. You don't want to end up, at the wrong conclusion, which is you're not convinced Jesus exists or God exists, or that could even look like becoming a more progressive Christian. So when you are coming from that environment and you do end up doing the unforgivable sin of believing something different or not believing it at all, it can be pretty horrifying. And even that, depending on your situation, can be an understatement because your brain has been trained to say,
I'm in danger!
But we know this is an effective tool that religion uses, right? I've talked a lot about, in previous videos, this tool of fear. Fear is a powerful tool. It can be such a good tool to get people to join the religion and also stay in the religion. Be afraid of leaving. Therefore, also be afraid of questioning or coming to a different conclusion. And in my experience, it can be really hard to escape that fear because if you grow up in it, this stuff has been ingrained in your brain while your brain was still developing. When you are at your most susceptible to this stuff in general, believing everything that people tell you about religion and the world and the reality you live in. But this isn't just my opinion. Pew Research has found that about 94% of current Christians in the United States were raised in faith. Only about 4% of people who call themselves Christian were raised without faith, and just 2% were raised in a non-Christian household of a separate faith. Which, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That is why sometimes you hear Christians romanticize things like childlike faith, if you have ever heard that term. Because although I don't think they would describe it this way, to me it signals that, you need to believe in what we tell you. You need to have childlike faith and not ask a ton of questions. Children are obviously way less likely to cause a problem because, again, their brains are not fully developed, and typically they are going to listen to trusted adults in their lives. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not trying to insinuate that people are stupid for having a religion or being part of a faith, but I do want to emphasize the fact that they do tend to romanticize this childlike faith idea, and that most Christians were born into the religion versus the 4% of adults who became Christian when they weren't raised in it at all. All of that adds up and makes perfect sense to me. But all of that to say, it can be very, very hard to break away from that. And again, it can be absolutely horrifying, and it's designed that way. I so often have so many people in my comment sections talking about how the one thing they cannot shake is the fear of hell. That is something that just so strongly stays in them, is so strongly ingrained in them. And again, it makes sense because your brain is developing and it is quite literally being ingrained in your mind, being pounded into your mind. And that's not just something you can quickly get over typically. Everybody's different, but a lot of people struggle with it, and it makes sense to me. Now, I want to talk about my experience with becoming what feels like a black sheep. Now, there were things in my childhood that made me feel like a black sheep. I'm not sure, they're not directly connected to Christianity, but it is directly connected to skepticism. There were things in my childhood I was very skeptical about, and it caused a lot of problems. But as an adult, I started really feeling like the black sheep when I did not respond to the MAGA movement the way most, if not all of the Christians around me did. I quickly became disgusted with Trump and his movement and what it represented. I was now hearing the people around me say things that genuinely shocked me while supporting things that also genuinely shocked me. This is why my politics changed before my belief in God did. I was obviously taught that these things like God is love, love your neighbor. So when this movement seemed to do the exact opposite, I felt hurt, I felt betrayed. In my mind, we were supposed to be different. We were supposed to show the love of Jesus Christ. And I want to be honest about something. The entire reason I was shocked by this reaction to the MAGA movement is because I really held on to the sugary sounding parts of Christianity. Jesus being love, and loving and kind and caring so much about the poor and the homeless and the sick, etc. That was really inspiring to me. His empathy was inspiring to me. He was painted pretty much as a humanitarian, and I think that due to the focus on Jesus and the language surrounding Jesus, I kind of had a naive view of what I was really a part of, because obviously I had been missing something if I'm shocked at how the Christians around me are reacting to the MAGA movement, aka becoming a part of it, and it's not just like some of them supporting it, it was all of them. To my knowledge, it was all of them. And so I kept thinking to myself, obviously I am missing something here, right? It wasn't until I was in my mid-20s I started looking beyond the flowery language and this empathetic Jesus figure. There was stuff I realized was lurking under the surface, and I was either ignorant to it or I didn't want to face it. My thought is it was probably some of both, and a lot of cognitive dissonance playing a role. I wanted to know why the Christians around me felt comfortable supporting a man who is extremely hateful and even talked about assaulting women by being caught on the hot mic saying things like, grab him by the pussy, and then later becoming liable for sexual assaults and obviously becoming a felon. The list goes on, and just the way he talked about and to people in general, it was very spiteful and hateful. I started to notice the shift in tone by the people around me, about immigrants, the homeless, gay people, trans people, basically people who were different than them. That's how Trump thrived, right? It was very much a gateway to him gaining power, was using division and anger. He preyed upon those things. It's a very us versus them mentality approach. I mean, we hear him say this all the time. He can't stop talking about how separate Democrats are from the MAGA movement, and many presidents don't speak this way, where the other party is the enemy of the country, but this is something he emphasizes. He even calls them the enemy within. He says he hates his opponents. We've never seen a president talk in such a divisive way before, and with so much spite and anger. This spoke to evangelicals, because the evangelical culture is an us versus them mentality, as much as maybe people don't want to admit that. And I don't want to get too into it, but all of it started to click. Because there's people on God's side, and then there are people who aren't, who are either working with Satan or of this world or lost or whatever you want to call it. And that is exactly what Trump presented, is us versus them, good versus evil. Their way of thinking was already on these same tracks, same with Trump not needing proof for anything he would say, and he would also say everybody was lying. He would never provide proof for these things, but evangelicals were already used to believing without proof and putting faith in someone without proof of anything they were saying started to add up perfectly and started to make sense to me. The QAnon conspiracy theories also played a huge, and when I say huge, I mean huge role in my deconstruction. It's something maybe I don't talk about as much as other things, but I have a lot to say when it comes to how conspiracy theories really started to intertwine with evangelicalism and the huge impact that had on so many aspects of my life. But it was huge in my deconstruction. It was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back because if I'm being honest, it really scared me. It freaked me out that this Christian conservative movement, aka MAGA, were now believing every conspiracy theory you could think of without any proof just because they watched some YouTuber make a video on it or they read some cryptic thing on Reddit. That was a huge wake-up call for me because even though I had already started to become more progressive politically, I started asking myself, well, what do I believe and why do I believe it? Because again, I'm watching them believe things just because some random person said something on YouTube or made a video about something on YouTube or read something on Reddit or whatever it might be. And I obviously thought that wasn't logical. It didn't make any sense. It felt like, people were being just too easily convinced of something without actually any proof to it. So I'm like, wait, well, what have I been convinced of without any proof, and does it make sense for me to believe that thing? Now, at this point, with my more progressive politics, I had already became the black sheep. Being Christian wasn't good enough anymore. I cannot tell you how many times I was told you cannot be a real Christian and vote blue. So it was becoming clear to me that there was no line of what politics was, what religion was. The religion was the politics was the religion, and now you must conform to both or you aren't a real Christian. So again, I want to make it clear that even before I became an actual atheist, I already felt like the black sheep because there was no separation of politics and God. MAGA movement felt like it was becoming the religion, or conservatism felt like it was becoming the religion. There was no separation of them. And to many people around me, there is no difference between being atheist and being a progressive Christian. That's why I have so much empathy for progressive Christians, because I understand probably a lot of the pain they go through and how isolating that might feel, even if they remain Christian. You would think it wouldn't be such a big deal, but depending on the area and the community you're a part of, it can be a pretty big deal. With this, and then on top of this, seeing how easily people were swayed into believing conspiracy theories that quite literally in their reality changed history, changed the weather with the weather machines, changed who the villains are in their worldview, I was quite literally watching them what felt like enter into a new reality. And then I was like, well, if they're believing a lot of these things, wild things, like Alex Jones telling people that Sandy Hook was fake and that the water's turning the frogs gay.
I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay. Do you understand that?
Then again, what was I a part of, and why do I believe what I believe? So I started digging. I started reading my Bible. I started seeing things in the Bible that I didn't know about that highly disturbed me. But again, there's a huge part of me that believes I was very naive because of this. And just like most Christians, I didn't know everything that was in the Bible. I come across a lot of Christians that don't know what's in the Bible, that I do know what's in the Bible now because I did go looking for it. And it's because a lot of this stuff I looked into, this isn't the stuff that you hear about on Sunday morning, because it's brutal. It's really brutal, and it's really hard to some of the stuff to say out loud, and on top of that, to justify. So I was very naive of who the God character really was in my religious text. It was highly disturbing. Some of those things, being something God commanded people to do, these really disturbing things were sometimes things he did himself, or like people, or telling people to do these things. I remember looking more into it, and I remember basically going into this panic mode. My heart was racing of, holy shit, this God is a monster. I could not get my empathy, my morals, and my values to justify what this God was doing in the Bible. I can't pretend like I didn't see this, and I also can't pretend like I can justify it. And then came contradictions, a lot of things that weren't adding up, and I came to the conclusion that the reason a lot of this didn't make sense is because this Bible wasn't univocal. And I learned that actually a majority of Christians do not think the Bible is univocal because of things like this. It became very obvious that the book was written by different people with different worldviews, so it made sense that they would contradict each other or have different views. It very quickly was unraveling and became very clear that this was a man-made product. And if this was a man-made product, this is not God's word, then why would I continue to believe in this God in this book? It became very obvious that this wasn't a text that was inspired by this perfect being. It was a human text that was flawed, had contradictions. People had different understandings of the religion, and that came through during different books of the Bible. And on top of that, why would I believe these men who wrote a book thousands of years ago without any proof? How is this any different than believing any other religious text like the Quran? You know, Christians always told me that, you know, the Quran was wrong, and plot twist, they're not any different. One doesn't have more proof of their, supernatural claims than the other. And I thought to myself, even if there is a God, I have no idea what it is, I have no idea what it wants, but I know following one religion without proof while saying other religions were wrong, and they didn't have proof, was not a reasonable position to me in the slightest. And that's why when people always say to me, well, have you looked into Islam? Have you looked into a different religion? No. The reason for that is none of these religions have proof. It feels like a waste of my time. Now, when I say waste of my time, I think religion is interesting, obviously. And even besides the deconstruction stuff, I think religion is interesting. It really like taps into human nature and how our brains work and stuff like that and ways that we cope with life. But beyond that, it didn't make any sense to me to go to a proof that, or go from a religion that doesn't have any proof to another religion that doesn't have any proof. What is the point there? But beyond that, I was watching so many debates between Christians versus skeptics, and the one that stuck with me the most and made the biggest impact was Bill Nye versus Ken Ham at the Creation Museum. And I won't get too into it. I'm sure a lot of you have seen that debate. If not, please go look it up. But what I will say is Bill was the only one providing any evidence for his claims. Ken looked like a fish out of water, quite literally. The only thing I remember him saying is bringing up smart people and saying, well, these smart people agree with me. And it's like, okay, and there are a lot of smart people who don't agree with you, so what, what are we doing here? What are you even saying? But it was honestly a hard watch because at that point I still was not atheist. So I went through a time period where I so badly wanted these apologists to give me something to work with here. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, okay, please, like, provide a good argument. I'm ready for it. I want to use this going forward. And there wasn't good arguments. Apologetics quickly became so transparent. So it just started to fall away very quickly because I'm like, wow, the amount of mental gymnastics these people do to try and make it make sense is pretty wild to watch firsthand. Anyways, the end result of those things and so many other things is that I came to the conclusion that I was an atheist, and more specifically, an agnostic atheist. I don't claim to know for a fact if God is real or not, but I'm just no longer convinced of the God claim. And for people who say you can't be an agnostic atheist, yes, you can. Here's this little chart to help you out. Again, I don't believe in God, but I don't think I can prove God isn't real. I think it's an unfalsifiable claim, and I think they do that on purpose. So, yeah, that's where I land. Now, the scariest part of this entire journey is I didn't get to decide to keep believing in God or not. My brain made that decision for me. I could lie to people around me and say I believe, even though I don't, but I'm pretty sure if their God is real and it's all-knowing, he'd figured out pretty fast that I was lying and I wasn't actually convinced he was real. So I basically was shit out of luck because my brain was no longer convinced, and I couldn't just be like, no thanks, I'm gonna keep believing. That I didn't have that option. And it didn't really matter how I felt about the issue or how scary it was or how much grief it was causing me, because I couldn't force my brain to believe. It's impossible. Just like it would be impossible for me to ask a Christian to stop believing in God at any given moment, or being like, hey, you have to be convinced for 10 minutes that I actually have superpowers and can lift buildings. I think if people say they can genuinely believe something like that for 10 minutes, I don't want to say they're lying, but I genuinely have a hard time believing that, that you can genuinely, at a flip of a switch, make your brain be convinced of something else. Maybe they know a huge secret that I don't know, of a way to convince your brain of something, but I don't know that big secret. So if you guys know that big secret, I guess let me know, because I have not discovered that superpower, essentially. My point being that I didn't choose to feel like the black sheep. It was painful, it was scary, it was full of grief and anger. Basically, I went through the stages of grief you go through when somebody dies. That's how intense it felt to me. But when you don't even choose to be the outsider, it can really sting. It can really be painful. And obviously there are some choices I make, like making this content, that can maybe make me more of a black sheep, but than I already am. But that's child's play compared to being one in the first place, if you know what I mean. As painful as all of this is, I'm perfectly content with being the black sheep now. I've come to terms with it. I feel a lot of peace about it. But of course I'm human, and of course it can still hurt to be the black sheep. Especially when you're used to being a part of this thing, and now according to their doctrine, if you believe differently or your brain came to a different conclusion, you are lost, or Satan has you in his grips. Or my favorite, the greatest trick Satan has ever done is tricking you into thinking he's not real. You could do this with anything. So in my religion, there's this cosmic cat and he created everything. And there's this other cat that's actually very evil. And if you don't believe in that evil cat, well, that's just him deceiving you. And that's his greatest trick, is convincing you he's not real. So that's why you don't believe he's real. Like I know in Christian circles, these things are said over and over again, and they sound good because they're like conversing with each other. But when you apply that to literally anything else, it's nonsense. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And yeah, it's not a very logical position in my opinion. Obviously that stuff can hurt though, right? Knowing people are looking at you that way, and all you really want is to feel accepted and respected. There was a time period where I was very angry at the concept that I felt like I was being punished for growing as a person. Like I was being punished for not having the same beliefs I did when I was 12 years old. It felt like changing and evolving as a person wasn't supposed to be part of the plan, and you can be highly judged for it. It's like I grew up, had different experiences, learned new information, applied that to my life, or it applied itself to me, and then I felt like people were looking at me as if, oh, well, that wasn't part of the plan. You were supposed to stay the same as you were when you were 12 and have those same politics and morals and values, and all of your life experiences and everything you've learned throughout being alive wasn't supposed to change any of that. And to me, it made me upset because that felt so unfair. I also want to be clear, I love the people in life who I felt like I became the black sheep to. I still love them, I care for them deeply, I think they care for me, and I think they love me too. I genuinely do not think it's malicious, and this could be different for everybody's situation. I'm speaking on my own experience here. I do not believe they are bad people. I believe this is how religion works. And even outside of religion, just how human social systems can work. There's so many examples of in-groups versus out-groups and people becoming black sheep for different reasons. They have hurt me. I'm sure I've hurt them. I can only hope that, although I'm not perfect, although I don't do everything right, that maybe they know I'm trying my best and I'm doing what I feel is right deep in my bones. And that was what I felt was right, was being honest, not lying and manipulating, even though some days I think that lying and manipulating them when it came to this topic maybe would have made it more comfortable for them. I don't know, but I was being honest. And there was a point in my life where I came to this realization where I'm like, okay, I have two choices. I can be honest about this now, or I can lie about it, and then years down the road, it'll probably come out somehow, whether that's conversation or whatever, And it'll be a lot worse because I will be pretending to live this life or pretending to be this person that I'm not. And that's when I'm like, okay, this is gonna hurt. This is gonna suck. This is gonna make people upset. This is whatever. But I'm not gonna drag this out. It will not be worth it to drag it out. It's gonna be worth it to deal with it now. And so even like I was being honest, even if it hurt them, I did it because I do want a relationship with them. And sometimes that requires pain and discomfort and confrontation that maybe you don't want to have. It can be really hard, especially with me. I don't like confrontation. I never have. It's been a thing that's really hard for me. But when you try to avoid it so much, it will come back and bite you in the ass a lot of times. Especially if it's something like you could do and you choose not to just to make everybody else comfortable. Yeah, I mean, obviously, everybody has different life experiences and different situations, but for me, that was my situation. But with all that being said, that's a quick summary of my story and how I found myself becoming the black sheep. But I'm here to tell you, because I know so many of you have had this experience in life. You've become the black sheep, and a lot of you, that wasn't the plan. You didn't like that process of becoming the black sheep. It wasn't something you wanted to be. But I do get why sometimes people start to wear it as a badge of honor because you weren't afraid. You were brave and you decided, I get to be my own person. I get to make my own path. But I'm here to tell you that you are not lost. You are not tricked by Satan. You are simply an individual and you deserve to be your own person. But there are people in other countries who can't say what they don't believe, or you cannot say what you think or believe because there would be serious repercussions, even violent repercussions. There are also people who are financially dependent on their parents or whatever it might be. I get messages from these types of people all the time, and my heart breaks for them that they do not get the same privilege. I also get a ton of messages from ex-Muslims who message me saying that they get so much from this type of content, and there are not many ex-Muslims they get to hear from. They don't get to hear stuff like this from ex-Muslims very often. And for the ex-Muslims who message me or comment or watch, know that when I speak about the deconstruction I've done from Christianity, that you guys are always in the back of my mind. And I know our stories might be different or even vastly different, but I do hope you can continue to find some kind of comfort in my type of content. But everyone deserves to be their own person, and I wish I could put into words, I wish I could put this into words, but I know that I just want you to know that you're not alone in this process. That is something that I needed to hear when I was going through it. It was very lonely for a lot of reasons, but I promise you, you're not the only one going through this process. It has been done many times. That's not to say that your pain isn't real. Your pain is real. Your feelings are valid throughout this whole thing. But I promise you that you are not alone in this feeling that you are feeling currently or have felt in the past. I consider it to be growing pains. Again, if you are allowed, if you have the privilege to, I guess, break away publicly or from one's close to you when it comes to belief or whatever it might be, it's not about rebellion. It's not about living in sin. It's not about Satan tricking you. You are simply outgrowing the person you used to be, and I believe you should be able to do that. You're not a bad person for doing that. You're not doing anything wrong for doing that. And it makes me angry that there are so many people with people in their ear telling them that they are wrong for that they're wrong for not being convinced of something, or they're wrong for being their own person with their own beliefs. You're not. That's just the human experience, and if it's not, I don't know what is. But that's all I really have to say. Well, not really, I could keep going, but we're gonna stop there. I don't know, this is just a topic that it's hard for me to put into words, everything I feel about this topic, but I don't know. I just want, at the end of the day, I already said this, I just don't want people to think that they're alone in this. You're not. But I hope you guys are doing okay. I hope you're taking care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.